with the Kayak Bass Connection podcast. I'm glad to have you join us as we continue to explore the people and the places that make up the great sport of kayak fishing. We are also very proud to now be the official podcast of the Southern Illinois Kayak Club Tournament Trail. A lot of times we'll focus our discussions on those upcoming trail events. Today's episode is the second in a series of interviews with local fisheries biologists that oversee all those public waters that we love so much and we spend so much time on. Co-hosting with me today is Mr. Caden Cox. Caden, thank you for being here today. And I would like to welcome our special guest, which would be Illinois Department of Natural Resources fisheries biologist Tad Locher. Did I get the right name, last name right that time?
You got the last name right, first name.
Tad, I'm sorry.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Tad, I appreciate you making time. I know you're a busy guy.
Sure.
Matter of fact, you were just on the water all day today, right? Tell us about kind of what your day was entailing today.
I was. So I just got back in town, but this time of year we're doing species-specific trap netting, looking at starting with northern pike earlier in February when that water's about 40, and then switching over to muskie and water's about 45. So we started at Spring Lake, which is the brood stock for our state muskie hatchery program, and then we move on following kind of that water temp to the north. And we did Prairie Lake last week, doing Banner this week, and then we'll move on to some of our other musky lakes. Hitting some of those lakes, looking at a really cool fish. It's not native here, but they've done really well, and it's a popular sport fish, and just gets a lot of attention. So we try to give it equally as much attention.
Yeah, it seems like the DNR has really, in the last decade or so, really started to focus more on muskie.
Yep, we get a lot of questions about them, and the muskie anglers themselves are very a passionate group. So they're always really interested in what's going on, and we try to have as much data as possible to give to them and make recommendations based off of that data. So
yeah, that's awesome. I've yet to catch my first muskie. What about you, Caden? Have you had an opportunity to put one in the boat yet?
Yes. Last fall, I ended up catching one in Arygyle there by Macomb, Illinois.
Oh,
yep,
okay.
We'll be at Arygyle in 2 weeks, and there's some nice fish in there. Argyle's a really cool lake, and that's a good one. If you haven't bass fished a tournament out there, that'd be a good one for kayaks.
Mm-hmm. It sure is, yep.
Arygyle. Awesome. We'll have to put that in the tournament director's ear. Maybe we can line some up next year.
It's kind of in the middle of nowhere, but it's a college town, so there's places to stay, stuff to do, and you could fish a 3-state, anglers too. You could fish Iowa and Missouri guys and make it over there as well. So
yep, nice. It's about 40 minutes from the Iowa border. So
yep.
Okay. Awesome. Now I know 3 lakes that you concentrate on that we're really interested in, among others, is Sangchris, Taylorville, and Coffeen. So can you let's just start with Sangchris. That's the one I'm most familiar with. Just give us a kind of, if somebody has never been on a lake before, how would you describe Sangchris?
Okay. So Sangchris is a energy company. It's owned by Vistra Energy. Used to be Commonwealth Edison back in the day, but they have a management agreement with the state of Illinois, obviously. So it is still an operational power plant lake, cooling lake, and it has been for a long time. It's almost 3,000 acres. It fishes smaller than that though. It's got 3 main fingers. It's a big lake. It's got 3 ramps, but each finger is pretty narrow. So it's not like you don't see people and you don't, run into other traffic. It gets a ton of tournament pressure. It probably has, I think, up to close to 110 tournaments this year, applications.
Wow.
So, and that's not including the tournaments fewer than 20 boats, which that's a new rule this year. 20 tournaments with fewer than 20 participants don't need to do the application process. So there could be more than that, and there likely will be more than that. So that's a tournament, almost every other day from March 10th through October. So it gets pressure. So, but it can support it. It's a fantastic lake. It's a pretty lake in the fall, especially, but it has common carp. It's turbid. You don't have, real great water clarity there. Back in the day when I was a kid, I grew up fishing that lake when I was little with my dad. So it's one of my home lakes.
Awesome.
So it's cool to be the one managing it now. But it used to have a lot of vegetation, had big, massive coves of American lotus and, water lily and different, submerged aquatic plants. But something happened about 15 years ago where there was a mass vegetation die off. It was a drought year. Something happened, and it wasn't just Sangchris. Quite a few other area lakes had these vegetation die offs, and there's so many common carp and turtles that it never got really reestablished. So the vegetation that people associated with Sangchris from yesteryear is no longer there, but it still has that same fish producing quality, and it's got a lot of structure. But people really liked fishing that lotus and along those weed lines. But we're trying to get it reestablished. There's some projects going on. We're trying to get that veg growing, but it's just a process. So.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of wood still in the water then, or?
Oh yeah, ton of wood. There's no shortage of wood, and there is some shallow areas where you can't even hardly reach the bank because of wind action and erosion. But there was a tournament there last Sunday, and I think all top 3 went over 20. So I mean, it took 22 to win. So I mean, they're chewing and there's nice fish in there. So
very nice. Now you have a variety in Sangchris. I think when we did another interview, we talked a little bit about the striper population there. It's kind of unique.
So that was a program started a long time ago. Pure striped bass. So when people say striper around here, a lot of times they're referring to hybrid striped bass, which is a cross between a pure striper and a white bass. And a lot of our lakes do have hybrid striped bass, but Sangchris does not. At least we didn't put them there. So it does have pure stripers, but we cannot produce them in Illinois. So they are sourced from a hatchery down in Arkansas, and there's been issues with production down there the past 5 years. So I don't think they've been stocked since 2017, maybe.
Okay.
But it is an annual request, and it's still part of the program. We just haven't been able to get them. So
gotcha.
they are still in there. I had a guy last year catch one. He wanted me to come weigh it. It was a 28. So there's some giants in there, and
nice.
It was, every bit as wide as his live well. So there's some big fish in there, and guys are catching them on live scope now, which has kind of changed the way people fish. And they're pelagic species, so they feed out in the open. Bust balls of shad out in the middle. So
they're easy to find.
You don't typically catch them, bass fishing or beating wood. But those guys out in the middle with the forward facing sonar can kind of dial them in and catch them in that deeper water. But they are in there. Sangchris is known for that historically. State records out of there. State record flatheads out of there, and a lot of good bass. The crappie are kind of going through a little bit of a change right now.
Okay.
So that it is a cooling lake, but they don't run it very much anymore. A lot of our power plants hardly run at all. So it might have ran a week or two total out of the whole year. So once stayed, warm all year long, there's a whole hot arm that it might have been 60, 70 degrees in the middle of winter, but now it might only be a couple degrees over the rest of the lake. So
now, do you see that causing any sort of kill-offs or anything with that short infusion of heat in the water? Or?
No, not in that aspect, but so there's 2 species of shad historically that were in there, the threadfin shad and gizzard shad. And threadfin are notoriously intolerant to cooler temperatures, so that we haven't seen threadfin in several years. So that was threadfin don't get as big as gizzard shad. They only get to an inch or 2 long. So that was an important food source for young bass and the crappie. So we're missing kind of those big balls of threadfin that the crappie really thrived on. So now we're getting kind of a hang up of crappie in that 6 to 8 inch range. There's still some big crappie to be caught, but the overall average is not quite meeting the current regulation. So that's going to be changed next spring. But everything else right now looks great. Bluegill have always been kind of hung up in that lake. But nobody really goes there specifically to bluegill fish. But the bass look great, flatheads look great, stripers are still in there. As far as forage goes, just
anything that's really out there that.
I mean, a lot of they're opportunistic, so they'll feed what's most readily available, and in a lot of our power plant lakes, especially, that's shad. There's balls of shad, and they're a high calorie fish, so they get a lot of return for a minimal amount of effort.
Okay.
So a lot of them are shad. Historically, if it was a bluegill lake, they would typically go after bluegill first, but there's just such a high density of shad that's the primary source. Not saying they won't eat a frog or they won't eat a crawdad, and they won't eat worms, because they do. But I would say if you took diets from the majority of the fish, there would be a lot of shad in it.
A lot of shad.
Yep, but if they swim by a crawfish, they're not gonna just let it go. They're gonna eat. So
yeah. Do you know any or see any problems coming downstream with Sangchris? Anything on? You noticed you said something about the crappie. You're going to be changing that regulation. Is that it?
Yep, but everything else, I don't foresee any issues, and I don't foresee the crappie getting worse. So the lake I've had people voice concerns about the power plant shutting down, because they are supposed to go offline before too long. All coal-powered facilities in Illinois. So that was Coffeen. We can get that in a little bit. Sangchris, Springfield, Powerton, Newton. I mean, there's a bunch. The only one that really isn't going is probably like Clinton, the nuclear facilities. So, but pretty much all the coal lakes are going to be we call them ambient. So they're just going to be regular old lakes, and there's plenty of regular old lakes in Illinois that do well. So I don't see why any of the other ones won't, either. They might have a bit of an adjustment, just like Sangchris is going through, and Coffeen is going through almost not identical, but a very similar thing with the crappie and the bass. So, but I don't see any real issues. Just like anything, it might need some regulation changes and harvest, pressure. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. What about? Are you guys installing any structure, fish structure in Sangchris or any lakes that we're talking about?
Sangchris we have, and there's a map that shows some of it, but that's primarily crappie stuff. But there's so much wood in that lake that. So the structure that is in there is in that hot arm. So they close the east and the west arm in the winter for duck season. So that middle arm stays open, and we put some structure in there because guys would fish there into duck season in the past. So that water isn't really staying open now that it's not a hard arm anymore. So, we'll see. But there are some smaller scale projects going on. I've got a bunch of stuff actually sitting out there at the site office right now that needs to go in, but nothing massive other than the vegetation reintroduction is probably the bigger project, but not in the other ones right now currently.
So what kind of vegetations are you trying to get going again? The same ones that were present earlier? Or?
Well, so all that stuff is still in the seed bank. So, I mean, it's still down in the sediment. What happens is the common carp, the way they feed is they root around in the sediment and keep all that stuff stirred up and keep any vegetation from getting established. And the other problem is turtles. Turtles will just eat the crap out of some of that stuff. But the cages that the vegetation is in, it grows great. So if you can keep the predators out, the vegetation grows. But it's kind of like every year we're trying to make it a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, to the point where it's kind of like a food plot for deer. Once you make it big enough, eventually they can't, wipe it out. So we're hoping to eventually we can get it big enough till it takes off on its own. So, Spatterdock seems to be doing the best. And then a lot of the submerged stuff, American pondweed. But the lotus, there is some lotus, but it seems like Spatterdock's been the most successful so far.
Okay. You started to talk about Taylorville, and I kind of interrupted you a little bit. That's one that's new to us. What can you tell us about that lake? It's interesting on the map.
Yeah, so I didn't mean to go to that one before you were ready for it. I was just going to say that I haven't done any habitat work in there because it's a pleasure boater lake a lot of times. So, you can't. It's a shallow lake, primarily. It is a shad lake. It's stirred up a lot, common carp, just like Sangchris.
Okay.
No vegetation in Taylorville. So Taylorville, honestly, it's kind of an interesting choice for a kayak tournament, because it does get windy. If it's, if you get a pretty stiff wind, it might not be super enjoyable. But there are some big bass in there, but they're few. It has had trouble with recruitment in the past.
Okay.
So the catch rates in the fall survey are typically much lower than I would like them to be. But seems like I always get a 7 or 6.5s and a lot of 6 3/4. Like you get some big ones, but that might be your only fish of the day. So I would expect that tournament comes down to a couple people that catch their ringers, and everybody else might have a pretty crummy tournament. But it's
that's all right.
And then depends on time of year too. I don't know when that tournament is, but it could could be some boaters out. So I would say get there
will be
early if you can start as early as possible. And then just try to stay out of the way.
Yeah.
There's not like a ton of coves to get into from the boat ramp. So the boat ramp is on the far end where the dam end, which is the biggest, deepest part of the water. And so most of the shallower coves and stuff are toward the other end of the lake. And, the guys with good motors and good batteries could probably make it up there, but the average guy probably isn't going to want to pedal up there. So it'll be interesting. I'll be curious to see how you guys do with that one. But like I said, there are big fish in there. First 7-pound bass I ever saw came out of Taylorville. I went there in high school on a job shadow with the former biologist Dan Stevenson, and that was the first 7-pounder I ever saw was on that survey in high school. So
hey, that job shadow turned out pretty well.
So that's another one that I have history with, and now I manage. So
that's incredible.
That was I had the stats brought up on that one, and we did catch a 6 3/4 and a 6.5 last year, but we were only getting 25 to 30 fish an hour. So typically we like to see at least 60 fish an hour.
Okay.
So about half the catch rate, but you got some quality fish in there.
Well, one thing about those tournaments is that if you go to that lake where it's tough and you're not catching, you don't have your 5, you still might do pretty good if you've got 3 or 4 decent fish.
If you've got a couple 20-inchers, you could still put some numbers together, but I have a feeling guys will struggle with that one.
Okay.
So you said it's pretty flat all the way around. There's no wood structure.
There's some, there's some, but there's some like camping lots and some docks. There's actually quite a bit of rock on that one. I was just going to
say, is it rock banks on the dam? Is there some docks?
There's quite a bit of riprap. You might be a finesse type tournament. You might have to do some finessing. I doubt you're going to be ripping frogs across that one. But if you find some aggressive fish in the wood, you might get some aggressive strikes, but I think a lot of them are going to be finesse caught fish.
Could it be one offshore on ledges or anything like that? You said the deepest parts by where we launch with
there's some now. Yeah, there's some shore access. There's some good areas down toward the dam, especially crappie spots. We always get crappie down there, but it's gonna be tricky. There's a lot of spots that don't hold fish at all. Like there's these big shallow flats where there's docks and stuff that seem like they don't ever hold fish. But then you get to certain spots where like all the fish are. So it's gonna be kind of once somebody finds a spot, they're probably gonna be the ones that take it home, and everybody else might fish all day without might be measuring 1 or 2 fish. So
yeah.
So it's definitely something you might want to practice the day before, to be honest.
I would definitely pre-fish that one if you could. Yep.
Yeah.
Find the spot.
And I don't know if you guys have to launch in certain areas. Well, there's really only the one launch. I was going to say there's spots that you could definitely put a kayak in, but that they're not actual boat launches. So
I don't know how Josh is going to do that, because KBL, you can launch anywhere and port anywhere, but Josh has always made us do the same ramp. I think.
Yeah, I mean that's probably, and it's a nice ramp, and it's got a protected like marina, so but it'll be busy. I mean, I would definitely get out there early and try to be the first ones there. You'll have that, and Sangchris will be busy too. Well, all of them are going to be busy. That's just how it is anymore. There's just a finite amount of public water, and everybody's got to share. So
it's a shame that the state didn't have the money or the gumption to invest in some new impoundments, but they're just not making them anymore.
Yeah, you don't. I would say, and this is just a prediction, I have no idea, but once some of these coal-powered plants shut down, I could see maybe down the road we picking up some of them, but you're not picking up new ones. You're basically just going to be the sole owner as opposed to management.
Yeah.
So, but there's not making any new water. So it's just kind of where we are in Illinois, and I feel like we do a pretty good job with what we have, and we have some really fantastic lakes. So
we do. All right. What about Coffeen? Coffeen's an interesting place.
Yep, Coffeen, another power plant lake, been offline. I think winter of 2019. It's similar to Sangchris. It's smaller. It's I want to say probably 1,100 to 1,200 acres. It's long and oval, I guess. It doesn't have like any fingers or anything. It's pretty much a straight shot. It does have two ramps. The south ramp is the main ramp, the popular ramp for the boaters. But the north ramp, which is smaller, is the better bass fishery, in my opinion. The north end of the lake is much better. The south end of the lake is really deep and steep-sided. You can catch fish, and guys do, but that north end is where the survey always shows, the best fish. And it does have vegetation. It's got good vegetation. It does have common carp, but not nearly as bad, or for whatever reason, they're not as big of a problem. It's got lotus. It's got several different submerged species. A lot of wood.
Good mixture then, yeah.
Yep, it's got a lot of stuff, but it can be tough to fish, especially that deep end. I mean, the deep end is almost like a different lake. You get down there and you might have 6 to 8 foot of visibility, and spooky fish and fish that aren't, at the surface. I mean, guys might be running, don't hardly even bass fish, but you might be drop shotting down there, and at the north end you might be ripping frogs. So it's definitely a different lake depending on which way you go.
Nice.
But it'll take 20 pounds to win there a lot of times. So it gets a ton of pressure too. A lot of pressure. I think Greenville calls that their home lake, the college program down there, and a lot of the local high schools fish there. There's just a lot of youth tournaments, a lot of tournaments in general. But that one it'll fish smaller too. I mean, if you get 50 boats out there, the guys are going to be not in each other's lap, but you're going to have to paddle
close
to get to some spots. But it does have a couple coves that go back into. They're not big long coves, but they're 200, 300, 400 yards off to either side. But the majority of the lake is pretty straight and narrow.
All right.
Good bass though. I would say the overall average is not as big as Sangchris. Sangchris and Coffeen are pretty similar though. I mean, that'll be a really good tournament. You'll have some really nice weigh-ins on that one, or measurements. And I would say there's a lot of fish in that 2 to 4 pound range, and you'll get quite a few 5s and stuff like that, but you don't see a lot of the 6.5, 7s. But the overall average is really good in that lake. So, I mean, I expect a really nice tournament there. It is a shad lake, but it's different than Sangchris. It's more clear. It did have threadfin in the past too, but they haven't shown up. So that's a similarity to Sangchris. And the crappie are experiencing a very similar predicament. They're stacking up in that size class. And that regulation hasn't been proposed yet, but it will be. Especially after this year's survey, I expect to see that they're hung up. So, Sangchris and Coffeen very similar, and you'll have good tournaments at both of those. So it's
fantastic.
Neither of them have any homes or docks or anything around them, so they're nice and
That is great. Yeah.
and private and quiet. A lot of wood. Coffeen still has a 25 horse limit, but Sangchris does not. Sangchris lifted the motor restriction, but it's supposed to be idle speed only. So guys with bigger boats can be on it, but they're supposed to run idle speed. So
okay.
I have heard people breaking the rules, but we just replaced 3 CPOs down there, so I'm hoping that
yeah, they'll be busy.
More of a presence will discourage some people from flying across the lake, but Coffeen's 25 horse, so you shouldn't have any big motors. But sometimes those 25 horse boats can push a wake just as
worse
bad.
than a 150 horse motor. Yeah,
yep.
When they're plowing water. So you mentioned that the CPOs have upped their numbers. I know they've been hiring here a lot lately. Do you have a lot of interaction with the conservation police officers yourself?
Yeah, and very little negative type stuff. They kind of do their own thing, and they'll reach out if they have a question that they don't quite know the answer to. But we help them with training with the recruits. We get them out and they experience all the gear types and illegal gear types. We try to stump them with some stuff, and then we do a bunch of fish ID with them and everything. But I work pretty closely with a lot of them, and I'm on a texting basis with most of them. They're pretty good friends. So
awesome.
Yep. And there are a lot of them are younger, new guys ready to get their careers started and hopefully stay there for a while.
Sure.
So, yep.
That's great. Now, we're kind of unique to coming from the kayak side. Have and I don't know, as a biologist, have you seen much of this, but have you seen an increase in people using the smaller craft? And is that
yeah, including myself. I'm primarily a kayak fisherman too. I'm not fancy like you guys, but I fish out of my kayak. And I mostly bluegill fish. I like to fly fish.
Nice.
And catfish. But some of our lakes have specifically put in, kayak launches and kayak areas because it has been pretty popular, especially around the Springfield area. Shields is right there, and they sell a ton of boats. And we have some smaller lakes nearby that people like, and Lake Springfield's another one that it has a big long area of the lake which is idle or no wake and real shallow, so a lot of the boats can't get back there, and they're not necessarily back there to fish all the time, but there's just a lot of boaters that float, just like to float. Yep. So, and it's not, I don't know. I'm trying to think how many different tournaments. There might be 3 or 4 kayak tournaments. 3 or 4 different groups. You guys and KBL, and I think there's maybe 1 or 2 more. A lot of them are pretty small. They might only be like 10 boaters or something like that. But there are some smaller local clubs, and it's guys that they just want to fish, and a lot of them are real. They're not even. Some of them might not even be for money. I don't know. They just like to get out and fish with other people that have little boats. So
yeah, and we're doing a little of that ourselves. Since now, as you discussed, there's a new rule that you don't really have to have a permit with under 20 boats. We're having these little mini tournaments where there really is not any money at stake or anything like that. Guys just say, hey, if we can get 5 or 6 guys together to fish on Friday at a lake, let's just do it.
Yep, and I wish more of the other boats would go to that style of fishing, Fish Donkey or MLF or whatever you call it, the CPR type tournaments. And those there are a couple guys going to those, but the vast majority still like the glory of the weigh-in. And it is what it is. I understand. But
Sure. Yeah, eventually the resource is going to demand us to think the way we do it.
It's hard on the fish, especially in the summer. I mean, man, a tournament every other day in the summer, something probably eventually is going to give. But I've said that before, and the lakes just keep hammering away. And
producing.
Yep, at the end of the day, the fish they're weighing in, they could take home legally too, if they wanted to eat them. So it's the reg's there for a reason, and so far they maintain themselves pretty well without any supplemental stocking. Taylorville is one that gets bass though. It's on an annual request for I think 5 to the acre, but it has maybe had minimal effect. I might need to bump that one up a little bit. So we'll see.
Is it easy to get, the common species of bass, crappie, things like that? Are those stockings easy to get from your own?
For the most part, yeah. The big thing is you have to justify it. So you have to have the data to back up your request. So you have to show, that, and it's typically pretty apparent in your sample. You're short on this. Your crappie are here, and all you got to do once you put our data in is you look at your graphs, look at your numbers, and it's pretty apparent most of the time. Just deciding which reg to go to at the end of the day is kind of the main thing. What's going to try to please as many people as possible. So,
yeah, that can be a difficult job. You can't please everybody and do your job at the same time.
Yeah, especially when it comes to multiple user groups. So, I mean, what pleases the boat fishermen might not please the kayak guys, and what pleases the crappie guys might not please the muskie guys. So, it's just you do the best you can and make everybody as happy as possible. But, I think we do a pretty good job most of the time. So.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Kaden, do you have anything else you wanted to ask?
No, I think you guys are both covering it pretty good. I'm enjoying listening.
Now, one thing you mentioned, Tad, is that you kayak fish and you fly fish. You do those at the same time?
I do, yeah. It took a while to kind of get good at it. I wouldn't say I'm good at it. I'm adequate out of the kayak. There's certain types of casts that become more effective, but I can stand up in mine too and fish pretty easily. It's a 12-footer and it's stable. So, and I don't pedal. I don't have a pedal, so there's room. But you're not making any big miraculous casts and double hauling stuff. You're just flipping bluegill flies out there and catching them on the.
That's got to be a blast, though. Yeah.
On the beds, yep, and even a nice bluegill will pull you around, which is fun. So.
Yeah. What lake do you like to target for bluegill?
So I don't know if you guys have ever fished at Jim Edgar Panther Creek. So that's.
Yeah, is that Prairie Lake?
Well, that's one of them. Yep. So it's a complex. The whole park it's massive. It's 15,000 acres.
Yeah, I love that place. Yeah.
Prairie Lake would be an awesome place for a tournament, but the bass fishery's kind of hung up a little bit. We learned that. We had a tournament there I think 2 years ago. We learned that the hard way. Yep. So it is a tough lake to fish just in general, but that's another one that has big fish kickers, but the average is small. Yeah. But that's almost by design. So that lake was originally intended to be a panfish lake, a trophy panfish lake, and it kind of went through some different ebbs and flows, and it went through its peak of really fantastic bass fishing for about 20 years, 15 years. Then it got pounded with tournament pressure and nobody's keeping fish, and eventually the bass they become overpopulated. But now the bluegill, I mean, the average bluegill is probably 8 inches, and there's just 13, 14, 15-inch crappie, 48-inch muskie, nice catfish. It's just really good for everything but bass right now. So that's kept a lot of the bass pressure off. But now the crappie guys and the muskie guys are there with their live scope, and they're having a blast. So just going through a cycle, and that's where I go. I love to fish there, and it's a peaceful lake and a pretty park. So
good turkey
hunting. And it's great turkey hunting and deer hunting. Yep.
Yeah. Now, at the start of today, we were happy to have you on because you've been out in the field all day long. You've been at Banner, so let's kind of go back and let's talk about Banner. I know, even though we're not fishing that this year, we have in years past and probably will again. And I think it's one of the neatest fisheries we have in Illinois.
Yep. So Banner's a really unique place. Obviously, if you've been there, but it's unlike anything we really have. You can't even really compare it to anything else. So it's coal mine ground. Most of Fulton County was coal mine. And when all those veins were, left and the equipment removed, they just filled with water, and Banner Marsh was all these different coal mine cuts that the state picked up, way back when, and Rob Hilsebeck's been managing it for close to 30 years now. So it's done really well. There's 3 main lakes out there, Banner or Wheel, Shovel, and Johnson. Johnson being the main one. But it has a slot, which doesn't apply to you guys. But for the boat guys, it's a 12 to 18-inch slot. So I mean, guys will win tournaments with some really nice fish. But yeah, you can't keep any of those middle-sized fish. So, but that doesn't seem to bother anybody because guys have some big tournaments there, and they do really well. So it's
19s and above aren't pretty common. In tournaments.
Yeah, and it's, man, in the fall survey, you get to certain spots of that lake, and it just bass everywhere. So it's an interesting lake. I mean, it'd be tough to fish, but it's a great kayak lake, and a lot of really cool little spots to get into and fish. And I don't know if when you do the tournaments you're allowed to fish all 3 or if you just fish one, but that'd be kind of fun to just pick where you want to fish and then meet at the main ramp or something.
We've done, the last time we were there, you could fish any of the big 3, and we met at one ramp. But I know there's also a lot of small ponds there, right? That don't have ramps that you can.
Yep. Well, and you can get kayaks in any of them if you wanted to. I mean, you could get a kayak anywhere, and some of those small ponds. So if the water's right, and right now it's pretty high, a lot of them connect. So like Johnson, the middle lake gets walleye, but the other lakes don't. But we sample walleye in the other ones every year. So it's there's a lot of transition, and there's muskie in all 3.
Okay.
The crappie, I would say, are good, but it's a bass factory for sure.
Yeah.
So
it's impressive fish that come out of there during the last tournament. I know that KBL fishes there a lot. A lot of tournament trails do. It's
a lot of wood, a lot of vegetation, good water quality. It's got a little bit of everything, but not really a shad population there. I mean, it's more of a bluegill fishery or bluegill forage base, and frogs and anything else you could probably throw. But I wouldn't probably go there with a shad colored, swim bait. Not to say they wouldn't eat it, because they would, but
it's not they're used to seeing.
Not their main forage probably out there. So
awesome. Okay, do you have any other questions, Kate? Kate, you want to throw in there?
I do not. Nope.
Okay, fantastic, man. You covered a lot of ground, Tad. Really appreciate the big knowledge dump that you did there. A lot of good information. Now, how long have you been managing in the management level?
So I've been here 5 years now. A lot of us and other guys you'll talk to came from other entities, state funded stuff, the history survey, and a lot of us were in research and stuff like that beforehand. But I've been here in my current spot for 5 years. So
great.
Just getting started, but I don't plan to leave, so I'll probably be here my whole career. So
you don't hear guys getting those jobs and then leaving in 2-3 years. It seems like you get a lot of guys that are career lifers, and that's a great thing. The fact that you love what you're taking care of has got to make work a lot easier to get up and go to every day. That's for sure.
Yep, it's I say it's the best job in the world, but that's just me.
Yeah,
so
well, I can see that. Well, listen, I guess there was a question I wanted to throw out there before we get off is, as a kayak tournament club or just as anglers, what can we do, or can we do anything to help your job be easier?
Not really. Just continue advocating, for access is a good one, public access. And there's stuff getting involved. I don't know if you guys follow like the backcountry hunters and anglers groups and stuff like that. There's
I'm a member of that. Yeah.
Yep. Get involved with that type of legislation and just stay involved in stuff that's going on. But as far as our public water goes, just be advocates and supportive when you can, if you feel that inclined. But yeah, just and try to get the misinformation. There is a lot of bad information that gets out there. So having stuff like this is super helpful. Just getting stuff straight from the source.
What's a common myth that you hear?
Oh, I don't know, but there's all the Facebook groups. The
Okay.
comment pages just run. The
Oh,
comment
yeah.
section just run
Yeah.
rampant, and most of the
Yeah.
time we don't chime in because it's not worth it.
Hmm.
But we try to put as much real good information out there as we can. So, share I Fish Illinois posts if you get a chance. A lot of our surveys are shared that way. But
Okay.
if anybody has any direct questions, just call us. We pick up
Okay.
our phone all the time. I talk to
Yeah.
5-6 people a day, just random questions. So
That's
just
fantastic.
contact your biologist if you got a question or if you want the information straight
Okay.
from the source. And it's not some big secret. We're happy to talk to you and tell you anything you want to know. So.
Well, on behalf of everyone watching and everyone that participates in these lakes and use them, thank you for taking such good care of the resource. I know it's a difficult job sometimes, trying to deal with all the user groups that all want a little something different sometimes. And we appreciate the work you do. So thank you.
Yes,
Well,
thank
we
you, Tad.
appreciate
Yeah.
being appreciated. So we like it when people have good experiences, and that at the end
Sure.
of the day, the people that buy the licenses are what keep it all going. So
Yes.
continue to buy your licenses, buy your trout stamps, even if you don't really use it. It's $5, and that's what funds the whole program. So,
Okay.
so
Yeah,
thanks
that's
to everybody
awesome.
that buys a license and keeps everything ticking. So.
All right, perfect. Well, thanks again, sir. I'm gonna have you stay on while I stop recording here, but to the audience, thanks for joining us. We'll be out with another episode soon, and make sure you subscribe so you get notified.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you.